You watched the DNC at all?
No. No, I take that back. I did. I watched Obama's speech. I watched those delegates ignore the Palestinian protesters.
I wouldn't say ignore. I mean, they did attack some of them with campaign flags.
Oh, no, yeah. No, I saw the ones that were putting their fingers in their ears.
Yeah, when they were saying the names of all the children that they're, tacitly complicit in killing. Yeah.
Great look.
They didn't want to. They didn't want to hear it. Maybe, I don't know. Brat Summer.
I've ignored the whole Brat Summer thing.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to define, is why. Also, it could be like. I mean, I guess it's some. It's about Kamala in some way, but maybe it's also like the sound of like an IDF sniper rifle. It's open to a lot of interpretations, and I think that's what the DNC is trying to tell us.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, fuck them.
Fuck them.
Okay.
Welcome to The Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Hello.
Hey, Ray, how you doing, man? Well, good to have you back.
I'm pretty okay.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm really glad to hear it. You had something to say, didn't you?
What was I saying?
Oh, I don't know. You don't remember?
I liked Richard Butler. I want him back.
Ah, that was it. That was what you were saying before the show. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, are you sure? Are you sure that's what you meant to say?
No, Fritz. This is pretty much what I meant.
Oh, well, then I'm really glad to have you back. You've been gone too long.
He has. And, well, if you haven't noticed, that is Raybot 5000.
Oh, well, you don't think they bought it?
Do they think they bought it?
No.
Ray is alive. We absolutely swear.
Yes.
Instead of giving a proof of life message from him, we have made a Raybot.
I'm pretty okay.
There, he says so right there.
He's fine.
That's proof of life right there. What do you want? Yeah. So,
Ray in real life, Ray will be back.
Yeah, very soon.
Very soon. It was in the interest of getting this on time that he couldn't make it today because he's traveling. But
he literally forgot that he had a flight.
Yes,
like really far.
Yep.
Yes,
he forgot about it.
Yeah,
but scheduled this recording, and so the show goes on.
Well, yeah, and
I'm curious to see what Raybot has to say though about a great many things.
There was something about something that he mentioned somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Right. Yeah,
that is actually true.
That is often true.
Thanks, Ray.
Yeah.
You tell him, Ray.
Do we have please tell me you have a sigh at least in there.
Oh, you know what? I don't think I programmed Raybot to feel a depression yet.
Does Raybot say, but these people are idiots?
He doesn't.
His trademark way?
He doesn't, but Raybot does say
boner
whenever I want him to.
Boner.
So I feel like that's our consolation prize.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that there's good stuff to harvest from some of these episodes.
You know what's funny is I actually have no idea where that one came from. I'm forgetting. I completely forgot. I did like a speed run of just things that that I thought would put Ray into compromising positions. And I found
boner.
So I'm pretty happy with the search.
Well, okay, that's good compared to some of the stuff that we've thought about what it would sound like out of context.
I got some of those too.
I'll bet you do.
All right. Well, yeah, so Raybot, you just sit back for a bit.
Kick back and relax, Raybot. And
when you feel it, chime in.
Yep.
All right. Also, what's great about Raybot, we don't got to pay him.
That's true.
No cuts for Raybot.
We don't have to, there's this list, not as much setup, he's just a button away.
It did take some setup, but now you're right.
No mic cable problems. Away. No.
You're right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Perfect. So we are back with Carto Part 2, Willis Carto and the Liberty Lobby Part 2.
Willis Carto and the Liberty Lobby.
I was hoping that this would be the last one, but I think it probably won't be, unfortunately, for all of us.
I think something about us psychologically didn't want Willis Carto to be this important. And
well, it's like we said in the last episode. He's important in that his career stretched an incredibly long time.
yes.
I mean, that guy's a Nazi basically from 1950 to 2015. That's
Right.
a pretty long time for somebody to be a Nazi.
Yes.
But he's just so boring as a person.
Yes. It's very
It's
true.
just that the things he did and the groups he set up and the people that he was affiliated with are way more important than he was in some ways.
right.
He's just, his personality is so utterly unremarkable that it it's kind of a slog going through some of this stuff. And I meant to ask you, you might have to do this in post. We might need the Law and Order sound effect because there's a lot of court stuff, I think, in this episode.
Yeah, I definitely do not have that prepared.
No, I didn't think you did.
No.
That's my fault.
I can offer you a couple of these though. But yeah.
Well,
This is sort of he does have a kind of well, this is our Pathe Mathos, of course.
well, I mean, when we get to the Holocaust denial portion of this episode, his writings about this are much like most Nazis, but it does kind of remind me of the whininess of a Myatt's
yeah,
Holocaust denial.
Yes.
The Magian myth of the Holocaust.
right, yeah.
This is like that, but like probably with an annoying Midwestern accent.
Well, we already have a sort of connection on the board between Myatt and Liberty Lobby
through Revelo.
Yeah, through
Yeah.
mhm.
Revelo will make
Publishing
an
of
appearance
Imperium.
here, of course, as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I said Imperium, the Galactic Imperium, not the regular Imperium, which is also a big part of this story today.
Yes. Well, also, he was in Liberty Lobby. I mean, he was affiliated with Liberty Lobby.
Yeah.
He was on their board or whatever. He was in the National Youth Alliance.
Yes.
Which I really struggle. We'll get there here in a minute, but
All right.
I struggle to find the youth aspect of it so much. It seems to be kind of underplayed. But yeah, there's going to be, it's the reason that this is going to go on for probably a third episode is that like you have to mention some of the legal stuff. And I tried to cut it down as much as possible because honestly, I don't care that much
Yeah.
about the minute details of suing and countersuing.
No.
and this
They were
the
very-
judge ruled this,
They were
and
very
Carto got mad.
what's the word? Not litigious dick.
Yeah, and surprisingly,
You're gonna let me get away with that. I like it.
surprisingly or not
Very
surprisingly,
comradely.
depending on which way you look at it, it's not the lawsuits from the outside that really did them in.
Right, of course.
It's a good
Yes.
traditional Nazi infight, but with this type of asshole
Yeah.
that does it through the courts.
Yes. Yeah.
Instead of like, shooting each other as they also tend to.
Yes. This is the suit and tie crowd. Though,
Yeah, this
you know?
is definitely the suit. I mean, this is
Pull up pictures now, just so you got it, of Willis Carto and Revelo P. Oliver. And then again, ask yourself, are these the faces of the National Youth Alliance?
Yes.
Youth for Wallace? Yeah.
yeah. They're definitely also because, like I said, he's affiliated with so many people. We're gonna need to do a third one just because we're not even gonna get into his like whole political party like I thought we would today. And there's some characters there that we'll probably even dedicate separate episodes to later in the arc when we get to the 80s and 90s.
Sure. Yeah, because we're here now, no matter how crazy these Nazis are and the people that they're affiliated with, a lot of these people were, for instance, like 4-time congressmen. And, these are, there's like long-lasting political figure, or people that were sort of more behind the scenes and like the moral majority times. And it's, it gets weird.
Or like, guys who appeared on the cover of Wheaties or, on the Wheaties box.
Blows my mind. That's so fucking crazy.
That kind of thing.
That's so fucking
but that's next episode. So
yes,
when we left off last time, Carto had successfully founded the Liberty Lobby.
Yes.
Partly due to his networking skills, and especially because he was able to inherit some mailing lists from the original Liberty and Property Group, which he took over as a youth. By the late 1960s, which is where we left off, Carto was attempting to translate his lobbying efforts into kind of concrete mainstream politics for the first time in like actually really full force supporting a political campaign.
Okay.
Which was, the original point of the Liberty Lobby in some ways, right? It would be a lobby group and influence politics.
Yes.
And the 1968 candidacy of George C. Wallace presented a good opportunity to do just that and for them to mobilize. Liberty Lobby, of course, wasn't the only like far-right group that threw their weight behind Wallace. The John Birch Society as well were big Wallace fans. And just in general, I mean, the last U.S. arc in this time period, a lot of the guys that we talk about who, a lot of them were Birchers, a lot of them were this and that. Almost all of them, in some way or another, supported George Wallace. That was kind of their last hope in kind of mainstream politics.
Well, and that's no accident either, because as we know from our studies of Asa Carter already, George Wallace's campaign definitely knew it had a base in these people and targeted them. George Wallace was also fairly quick to drop a lot of them as certain, as some of them fell out of favor with, like Asa Carter, for instance, fell out of favor with the public. So he was playing that game, and these guys were all eating it up.
Well, I mean, speaking of Asa Carter, from the get-go, so even before Wallace announced his candidacy, Carter called a meeting of different like-minded groups.
Just a reminder to our listeners, this is Asa Ace Carter, also known as Forrest Carter later in his life, man who began as a Klan guy, Citizens Council, affiliated with some of the most violent motherfuckers in that movement at the time, and then later finds a new life LARPing as a Cherokee.
Yes.
And becomes a famous author who wrote a book which became a Clint Eastwood film that we just covered on Patreon. Yeah. So get on the Patreon, y'all. Yeah. That's right.
So we have actually talked about Asa Carter a lot, and that's why I wanted to bring him up again, because Asa Carter at this time is working heavily in the George Wallace campaign. He's Wallace's speechwriter. He wrote the famous "Segregation Now, Segregation Tomorrow, Segregation Forever." That's him. Yeah. And so at this time, he's basically running the campaign, and he calls a meeting of all these different groups at a country club in Alabama, in Birmingham, to which Carto sends a delegate from the Liberty Lobby. But there's, guys, kind of big names from the segregationist scene at the time. Uh-huh. So Louisiana Judge Leander Perez, William Simmons of the White Citizens Council, former Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett, and then some other Birchers, and of course this Liberty Lobby delegate.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And like we said in the last episode, in an effort to combat growing youth leftism on the college campuses, and drugs and rock and roll. They explicitly hated all these things.
Yes, anything fun and cool
in 1968, which is exactly the time when this shit was popping off. Right?
Yes.
Carto decides that they need a youth movement as well, and what better way to mobilize the youth than through the campaign for George C. Wallace.
Oh, God.
And thus, Youth for Wallace was born. So, Youth for Wallace is kind of your typical political party youth campaign. Right.
Just think of Charlie Kirk in your head, maybe, and I feel like that's the target they were going for, was like guys that look like Charlie Kirk.
I'd imagine that
remembering that Charlie Kirk is like 40 or something right now, right? I don't know how old he is, but
I'd imagine that the type of people on college campuses in 68 that were attracted to the Wallace campaign were definitely the worst kind of like suit wearing to class dudes.
Oh God, yes.
So what they did is they started by publishing ads in student newspapers around the country, and would eventually boast thousands of members.
Ugh.
That the numbers can't really be confirmed, or I wasn't able to confirm them, but I don't doubt that they had at least 1,000 members or so. I mean,
Carto was really, really hip to the strength of the mailing list and the power of the mailing list.
Yes. And they were these ads were out in all the student papers. And so here, I'll give you, I pulled up one of these ads and I'll post it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
With it. And I'll read it here. In a crisis, it takes courage to be a leader. Courage is in italics. Courage to speak out, to point the way, to say, follow me. In a crisis, it takes action to survive. The kind of decisive action that comes from a man with sound instinct as well as intelligence. If America is to survive this crisis, if the youth of America are to inherit a sane and even promising world, we must have courageous, constructive leadership. The kind of leadership that only George C. Wallace, of all presidential candidates, has to offer. That's why young Americans who really think support Wallace. They know it takes courage to stand up for America against the pseudo-intellectual professors, the hippies, the press, and the entire liberal establishment. And they've got that courage. Thousands and thousands of tomorrow's leaders, the thinking young men and women of America who have the courage and who are willing to act, are joining Youth for Wallace. You should join too. There are no dues. Send in this coupon to receive your membership, the YFW newsletter, and a copy of Stand Up for America, the story of George C. Wallace. And then it has a little cutoff thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, this is typical political party jargon bullshit.
No dues and all dudes.
But, of course, like, stand up to the pseudo-intellectual professors.
Yes.
And the hippies and the like. So, yeah, there are no dues, and you get a copy of this newsletter and a free copy of Stand Up for America, the story of George C. Wallace, which is a collaborative
You mentioned this today, didn't you?
Written by Willis Carto and Asa Carter together.
So fucking crazy. That is such a Nazi book. You know what I mean? And this is what the party was the party pushing this as well? The George Wallace campaign?
So no, this was distributed through the Liberty Lobby.
Okay.
So officially, I mean, I guess this was the Youth for Wallace was separate from the campaign.
Well, yeah, right.
And Liberty Lobby did all of its own distribution of Stand Up for America, and they distributed hundreds of thousands. They printed a lot and they shipped them out all over the country. I think part of this was also Asa Carter's strategic move to have him slightly distanced from the Wallace campaign, because Wallace hated black people, but he knew that anti-Semitism was a kind of bad look at this time. I mean, also remember the whole Barry Goldwater thing, which did animate a lot of the right, but Barry Goldwater was ethnically Jewish.
Well, and also the Klan was, having their low period again around this time, right? They were
optics wise, for sure. Yeah, it didn't look good to be, even though, so like Asa Carter was a Klansman, was involved with all this shit.
Exactly,
but wasn't outed specifically, or kind of like it was known, but like, I think that they wanted to keep, and Asa was kind of working in the shadows anyway. I mean, from what we saw in that documentary that we talked about on the Patreon app, I mean, he was, holing up in his hotel room, pounding a fifth of whiskey and writing speeches.
Yes, exactly.
So he's not exactly answering to many people in the campaign.
And also, we got the impression too that he was a bit butthurt by all that. Like because then he ran for governor,
and
after
failed
he was dropped,
spectacular
failure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which, I guess, spoiler alert, George C. Wallace did not become president.
Yes.
So that also failed. But Carto knew that it would still be useful to have an outreach to the youth. So he opted to rebrand.
And Carto, again, his target is like your kind of middle class. Dad was in a country club.
Right.
His dad, really.
Right. So as a reminder of kind of my whole thesis of Carto, it's that, he was angry that his dad and his dad's country club friends didn't get why Yaki's Imperium is the best book ever written, and how the Jews control the world.
Right.
He thinks that they all know that the Jews control the world, but they're just too afraid to say it. And so, Liberty Lobby and kind of his whole career is an attempt to kind of mask some of the worst elements of, like, being a Nazi, supporting the Klan, Christian identity, all this bullshit that he's affiliated with his whole life, and trying to repackage it into this kind of, middle class respectability politics, which, I'll probably say that for next episode, but Tom Metzger, of all people, has a pretty good takedown of Carto because he was involved with Carto early on. But then later he's like he's a Nazi who's pretending he's not.
Basically. Right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And so, like any good youth organization, it's founded by a 40-something-year-old.
Of course.
At the Army-Navy Country Club in Arlington, Virginia.
Where all the kids hang out.
All the kids hang out. Yes, hello, my fellow children in the fucking country club. And so actually, we covered part of this National Youth Alliance story in our previous America arc. But everything about it is typical for a Carto organization.
Yeah.
So he starts something, loses control of it. Somebody else takes it up and does something else with it. And like most Carto organizations, it has trouble from the very beginning.
Yeah. Yes.
Or he has trouble from the very beginning. People don't really seem to like him that much.
No, everybody hates this guy. He's clearly he's a piece of shit amongst pieces of shit. That's got to say something.
So the first chairman of the National Youth Alliance, as it came to be known, was this guy, John Accord, who I think was a holdover from the Youth for Wallace. He was kind of a more mainstream conservative guy, young Republican conservative guy, obviously segregationist, but thought of himself more of as a conservative than, what he would come to see was happening in the National Youth Alliance. He would soon find out they would have their first mini convention at a motel in the Pittsburgh suburb of Monroeville, best known for being the site of George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead, by the way.
Nice.
And things were a little bit different than Johnny Accord expected. And that he was surprised when him and his kind of young Republican friends show up and they walk into this hall and there's fascist and Nazi flags. There's guys wearing Nazi pills. There's Horst Wessely.
There's memorabilia and shit like that from the war.
And they're kind of Carto's giving a speech about how awesome Yaki is.
Yes.
And Imperium and all that kind of stuff. And these guys are kind of looking around and being like, wait, what? I thought we just wanted segregation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
How long will this take?
That's what they asked.
We're not Nazis, God damn it. And so this is where this kind of first rift between, let's say, the moderate young Republicans. Again, I should preface this with they were also, on the Wallace campaign. So they're racists.
Yeah, exactly.
Fundamentally.
Yeah.
I actually don't have a clear idea what it means to be white.
Well, they probably don't either, right? But that's a good point. I think it's still, they're figuring that out right now.
I think they do.
Oh, yeah?
I think they have a pretty good idea of what it means to be white.
Are they on that kind of pan-Aryanist track? Or?
Well, not these. Well, it depends on who. So by the second convention, soon thereafter, this is the one now in, what'd you say, end of 69.
The
first one was kind of like the founding meeting,
right?
Really, I think it happens at the must also be 69. I think these are very close to one another. So the second convention, also same situation.
Very funny.
Room full of Nazis.
Yes,
and then these
less of these young Republicans. Or are they still kind of fresh?
This is they're trying to make a move now.
Okay.
So in this one, the guest of honor and one of the main speakers is, of course, our good friend, Rello P. Oliver.
Yes.
In 1920, the American Constitution had already been undermined by the aliens who wheedled gullible Americans into such booby traps as the White Slave Act, commonly called the income tax, and the Federal Reserve swindle. The Constitution had been even more seriously impaired by the hypocritical pretense that it was somehow compatible with democracy and with tyranny exercised by do-gooders.
And listen to that voice. If you are a young, up-and-comer with the energy, vigor of youth, would that not get your juices flowing?
Apparently not, because they tried to oust Carto from his own organization by calling a vote.
Good luck.
Which Carto lost, which is hilarious to me.
Well, yeah, he's not historically great with electoral
I mean, this is just how things work with him. People, they don't like him.
Yes.
And so, like, he starts a youth group. The youth in it are like, this guy sucks. Let's get him out of here.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
But, you know, I think he knew that this was going to happen. And he was sneaky enough to have actually incorporated the National Youth Alliance in D.C. several months before and already set his own leader.
Okay.
So he effectively voided the vote.
Okay.
And he kicked out the youthful Republicans that he was trying to get in the first place.
Yeah. Were you not paying attention to all the swastikas, kids? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
And from then on, it goes kind of full Nazi.
Let me maybe read, if you don't mind, this FBI
yes, please,
reportage of this January 25th, 1969 meeting held in the Hawaiian Room. Guest of honor, as we said, was Willis Carto. This is the one at the motel, actually.
Oh, okay.
This might be So it says this.
The speakers at the meeting were Paul Kismeet or Kisman, who began the meeting with a reading of Imperium. The second speaker was Byers.
That would be Lou Byers.
Who was followed by Mike Russell, Buffalo, New York, who spoke for 1.5 hours on Plato the Fascist.
Jesus.
Neil O'Connor gave a book review on the National Socialist Comrade. Willis Carto was the concluding speaker, who spoke about his meetings with Yawkey prior to his death and Yawkey's book Imperium.
Yes.
Many of the guests at the supper wore Nazi pins, including Redacted. In the course of the evening, the Nazi national anthem was played in addition to other Nazi music. Redacted. Room where Nazi medals, records, decals, uniforms, and war relics. Redacted. An SS uniform for $150.
Hey, $150 is serious money in 1969.
Yeah, I want to know who the redacted dude.
I want to know who the redacted is too. Yeah.
Shit. So that's what you were in for if you went to this fucking convention.
Okay, so I think that is the first one, but both of them happened around the same time in essentially the same place.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, they got to build the momentum. They got to.
Yeah.
It's like the DNC right now. They got to keep it going, keep the party going.
Yeah. So yeah, I love that. It's just the imagery of that whole scenario to me is just hilarious because I really imagine these dweeby
I mean, they all look like Nick Fuentes, but at the time, I guess they didn't really know they were Nazis yet. A lot of them.
Yeah. They walk in, they're like, what the fuck? Yes. A guy's yammering on for an hour and a half about Plato and fascism.
Yes. Yeah. God damn.
I mean, this is 1969. World War II was not that long ago.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, but again, we're going to have an episode coming up. I'm working on it. I'm trying to wrap my fucking brain around it, honestly. But we're going to be talking again about the capitalist classes in the U.S. And exactly what these kids' dads thought about Hitler. Essentially,
all right. Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, Revlo is of course, a big part of the early days here. But the National Youth Alliance, although now firmly in control of Carto, who put his own guy there, was due for another split, ironically, because of the power move that Carto had made to oust the kids that were trying to oust him.
Uh-huh.
See, when he incorporated the National Youth Alliance in Virginia, he placed this ex-Bircher dude, Lou Byers, who you mentioned before, in control. So he was actually, his name was on, the paper, every paper, whatever. He was in control. He was the head of the National Youth Alliance. This is, again, something that always bites Carto in the ass, too, because he never likes to be the one that's officially in control. And
I mean, he's
guess what happens
but
when you put somebody else in control, but you're trying to pull the strings the whole time. If you come into a disagreement, they'll be like, whatever, this thing's mine.
Yeah, of course.
Fucking do something about it, asshole.
Again, too many Fuhrers in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I've heard the story
but
before.
But that's the thing. He doesn't want to be the Fuhrer, but wants to be the Fuhrer.
Yeah.
And then when he wants to exert his Fuhrer powers, somebody's just like, no, dog, you put me in power here. Like, fuck off.
Yeah, he wants to be the gray eminence because nobody can stand him.
Because nobody can stand him.
He's he's not a likable guy, but he's a tactical one.
Yeah. So Lou and Willis
really
start to butt heads pretty early. And the National Youth Alliance splits into two factions, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The pro-Byers faction is called already the National Alliance, but it's not. The organization hasn't changed names or anything. That's what they're just calling their faction.
Okay.
And Carto's is hilariously again called Youth Action, even though again he's 45 right now.
Yeah, and looks it.
Yeah. This guy was born in 1926. Or
right.
whatever. He was born in the
this is like 69 at this point.
Yeah. So Byers eventually cedes his power in the split to a very familiar fellow.
Oh, yeah.
Of the show, Dr. William Luther Pierce.
I didn't even set up any Pierce clips.
We have
Free Holly. Well, I had to delete them to fit Robo-Ray on. Robo-Ray is a positronic matrix is pretty large, and I needed like all the soundboard things to be accommodating.
Man, this is the only time we don't have like Race of Beauty.
Actually, I'm so sorry. You are correct.
Race of beauty, race of night.
That's right.
100,000 Scrag coins.
For some reason, I have that. Okay, let's go.
All right. So, I mean, so William Luther Pierce continues under the National Youth Alliance banner before incorporating his own organization also in Virginia called the National Alliance.
Yeah.
He dropped the youth. He was a grown man at this point. I think he realized that it was fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, even though William Luther Pierce is obviously pretty familiar to our listeners, should we give him just a quick
of course
recap for any new listeners?
Of course. Well, at this point, like his career was just getting started, of course. He's come in charge of this pretty big organization and its massive mailing list. And from this point, he's going to try to start opening up like white nationalist compounds. He'll start at the church that we played just now, the hymn of. But I think most importantly,
which is the Cosmotheist
Church. Please check out those episodes. I lost part of my soul in those episodes, and I need somebody to go and find it. So he also started Resistance. Well, he bought Resistance Records and made it into
from Carto, who owned it before.
Carto.
Carto owned it, sold it to another guy who sold it to William Luther Pierce.
I forgot about
which is hilarious.
Carto's.
We'll talk about that next week too. But I'm sorry, all of that's hilarious to me because you just heard what William Luther Pierce's music sounds like.
Yeah, right.
And imagine Carto owning, like Carto hated rock and roll. Imagine, I'm just like imagining him like listening to like. He's like, I bought this record label, and then puts it on. It's like, lighten up your boots and put it on your braces. And he's just
none of the. This is more their speed.
Murder and vice, it's very nice.
That's probably.
I think that's too ethnic for. I think they are literally like race of beauty.
Yeah.
That's
the marching hymn, battle hymns. Yeah, exactly. These fucking lame motherfuckers.
These are the lamest people on earth. Boner.
That's right. That's what they are. Bunch of boners.
And most importantly for Pierce is the author of the Turner Diaries.
Oh, of course. How did I fucking forget that? You know why? Because I was thinking, like, I wanted to just mention who he was as a kid. William Luther Pierce is a guy who grew up with essentially, the equivalent of a slave in the post-slavery period. His dad had like a black prisoner working for free in the house that William Luther Pierce, not his dad, but the guy he lived with, his uncle or some shit. He grew up in this house with essentially a slave. Yeah. And like, he just sort of started this evil career then. And
William Luther Pierce is very much the kind of person that a guy like Carto was seeking out. And that's a lot of guys like
he was
Pierce,
educated in physics. I didn't mention that.
Right,
he was actually like a pretty well regarded lab worker. And I think he headed a lab for a while. Yeah. He worked for US government contractors as well. He has
a PhD in physics.
Yeah.
He, of course, was in the American Nazi Party.
Oh my God! Yeah. He slept on the fucking floor of the American Nazi Party.
I mean, he threw away a promising career to become a fucking Nazi weirdo.
Oh yeah. There was nothing stopping him from just being like a normal working lab physicist with a pretty well-paid government job. And he was like, no, I'm going to like try to run over protesters on the way to work. Yeah, which is something he tried to do.
And then join National Youth Alliance. Yes, and National Alliance under Pierce's leadership is probably one of the most successful Nazi organizations in the U.S. in some ways, because they They ended up getting a shit ton of money from probably the Order. I mean, they did.
Yeah.
They got it from the Order, but
yeah.
like, that was
Yeah.
never, they never got in trouble for that.
No.
They made a lot of money with Resistance Records.
They had a fairly seemingly pretty good relationship with the FBI.
They had a pretty good relationship with the FBI. That's
kept
the best
closing
you
the
can ask for.
investigations
Yep.
all the time. Things were going pretty well for that dude. But you know what? But I've been thinking since we started talking about Willis Carto and the Liberty Lobby, if maybe I would even want to say that Liberty Lobby is maybe neck and neck as far as like the most enduring and important institutions, because it was a functioning DC lobby in full sight of everyone, for decades. Like
for decades.
That's pretty impressive.
But again, it's hard to measure success here because, obviously because we're talking about Nazis, but also because the thing is with Liberty Lobby is that it was always running into the problem of his respectability politics and like his inability to really own up to what he was going for. And the same is not really true with William Luther Pierce. Their National Alliance was pretty explicit about what they were all about. And didn't really hide it. So in that sense, and they had the Order left the money for a reason. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
but you're absolutely right with this kind of this public-facing long-term project, and especially because so many things grew out of Carto and Liberty Lobby. I'd say Liberty Lobby is a contender for being probably one of the most successful, and Carto himself, who, like I said, was active up until his death, 9 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a pretty incredibly long career. And Pierce and Carto, they obviously had bad blood in this immediate period.
Yeah.
And that continued for some time. They never truly reconciled. I think that Carto was invited. He was invited to some sort of Holocaust denial event at Pierce's compound in the early 2000s. I think that was kind of their first kind of public rapprochement. Pierce always kind of had good things to say about Carto, though. Mm-hmm. And when Carto would get into some legal trouble that we'll talk about later in this episode with the Institute for Historical Review, Pierce came in kind of public support for him. And public support of that project.
Okay.
He recognized Carter's contribution. So they weren't, I'd say, on speaking terms, but they had a mutual respect for one another.
Mm-hmm. Frenemies.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Carto probably is the type of guy that keeps a grudge in some ways. I think he probably felt like
there's a reason nobody likes him. Yeah. And I imagine it has something to do with the same thing that makes him act this way.
Yeah. And I think it's reflected in
respect my authority.
Yeah. And I'll take you to court.
Yes. Oh God. He sounds like the worst.
Yeah. So despite having lost the National Youth or National Alliance to William Luther Pierce, Carto continued to chug along, and the 70s were, I'd say, arguably his most important decade.
Is he publishing that fucking paper that I was taking those insane pictures from then? Or rather, maybe not him personally, but the Statecraft.
Oh, Statecraft
magazine.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
like the Journal for Political Education, I think is what it was called.
We'll get into some of his publishing stuff in the 70s here in a minute, but you're absolutely right to bring up Statecraft. Statecraft, I think was not, I think Carto's hand wasn't directly involved in that, but I think it was a
Liberty Lobby thing.
It was a National Youth Alliance paper, and it was much more and I think, explicitly Nazi than some stuff that Liberty Lobby, and kind of crude, but that's okay because it's the youth.
Exactly.
It's the youth part. Yeah.
Well, it is crude, but it's also inscrutable sometimes. I mean, there's this
it's
comic,
crude but nerdy.
Maybe I'll post this actually on the Patreon, this crazy fucking weird inscrutable picture that they have there. They do comics a lot, little comic strips to be clever. Almost all of them are just deeply anti-black racist things.
Yes.
There is a fair bit of anti-Semitism in it, but interestingly, James Madole of the National Renaissance Party believed that Statecraft was written by a Jew. He was very emphatic about that.
I wonder who that would be.
But I was thinking that if that's true, we don't know. Of course, if they call everybody
they
Jews
call
all the
everybody
time.
Jews, yeah.
But like, if that is the case, I was thinking back to what you said about Carto in the last episode, that he did a good job of keeping token spots open for people to participate that were Jewish and maybe even black.
Oh,
right?
especially black.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, that goes back to the 50s
Sure.
to Wright. I mean, that's when he was
Right. Yeah.
he was featuring
Exactly.
Black nationalist writings.
So I mean, it's entirely possible. I did, but you don't know.
I find that unlikely. I think
do too,
Madol
but-
is insane, probably, and just because anytime like something comes up and they're like, he's a Jew, or he's Jew controlled and therefore a Jew,
or he's eating poop.
No, they actually do that. That's different.
Ironically, though, in the National Renaissance Party, Madol had two members at least who were Jewish. One of them closeted, Dan Burroughs, and the other one actually open about it, saying like he had somehow seen the light and left his Jewish father.
I mean, despite like anti-Semitism being kind of the core tenet of
well, I'd say one of the core motors of all this, right?
Well, of Liberty Lobby especially. He does. There were some like interesting Jews that were drawn to him, especially later. And like when he gets into some of this like free speech stuff, Holocaust denial stuff, there's weird libertarian kind of Jews that are with him on the tax stuff, even from like the 50s time period.
Well, in these, they're focusing, I think, a lot on the SDS, for instance, and they have some comics where like there's a white SDS activist and a Black Panther, and they're both in a zoo next to a gorilla, and the gorilla says like, "It used to be nice in this neighborhood." Actually, the way I said it was way funnier than the way they said it. They gave like a paragraph that the gorilla was saying. Yeah. They're very terrible comics.
I think no one would find these jokes funny.
I think you're right, Ray. I really do. They're really bad.
Yeah.
I love Robo Ray.
Yes.
Now I'm bored and I want to do something else.
Ray, come on, man.
How long will this take?
Dude, relax. What is that even in your... What is that there? What you got in your hand there? What is that?
Can you cut his head off and then give me his head?
Oh. He's lost his mind, Robo Ray. He's out of control.
He's been out for a while now since we put him in Liberty Lobby.
His circuits are fried. He's cutting heads off.
Yep.
Damn. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks,
I mean,
Ray.
so like with Statecraft, it doesn't surprise me that for that particular like political cartoon that there's like the SDS guy and the Black Panther, because the whole point of National Youth Alliance was to combat that kind of militancy that was happening.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And all the fun that was happening around it.
Right. So, I mean, that's the best they could do in terms of humor.
Oh man, it was really bad.
They say that like right wingers like, oh, the left can't meme or whatever, and like this is the kind of shit they come up with. You know what I mean? This is the 1969. This was them memeing, which is like
go to our Patreon.
Shit.
Go to our Patreon. Even if you're not a member, you can still check this out. There's a picture I'm going to post there, and we cannot figure out what it means. The caption is something about a lefty liberal and his bride is what it says in Norway, and then the picture is completely insane. Like completely insane. It looks like a kid was given acid, and this is what came out of it. But
yeah, but you know that they weren't, because this is just some psycho.
Yes, this is just their brain. Like so, if anybody has an idea of what it means, go check it out.
Please tell us, because we were kind of stumped on that.
This is way beyond us, Nazi brain.
So yeah, I mean, one thing that we've established is that Carto's not good with people, but what he is pretty good at is publishing.
Yeah.
And that's probably because he has minimal contact with people when he's, editing and compiling.
Yeah.
And, he can just do that with his wife. Did we mention his wife, by the way?
I don't think we did.
They get married, I think.
Who married this man?
A German Nazi lady.
Well, okay, actually. Okay. That actually was the only thing that would make sense to me. So,
yeah. His I think her name is Elizabeth.
Damn.
They married, I think, the year that he founds Liberty Lobby.
Oh wow!
And she's still alive. She's still doing interviews with God, what was that horrible Canadian Nazi BitChute dude? The guy that like has like a Hitler mustache and is like into like talks about getting abducted by aliens and shit. or like exposing the UFO agenda.
What? Like he's on now?
Yeah, he's like a bitchy dude. Anyway, I was looking up something about her, and I found an interview that he did like this year with her, like very recently.
Word.
Like, she's still alive. She's old as hell, and she's German.
Still a Nazi.
She's a German lady.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I guess, Elizabeth always stayed by his side. And so I guess she didn't, she could put up with him, but a lot of others couldn't.
Yeah.
And he amassed a huge number of publications, even from the very beginning. The way he built his whole network is through mailing lists, through Right, the most dull and non-creative name for a right-wing magazine ever, or newspaper. But, like he drew in people from all over the place, and he was pretty good at that. And so the 70s are very good for him in that regard as well. After Liberty Lobby was founded, he immediately founded a publishing house for publishing the books that he liked. Of course, Imperium.
Yeah.
He's the one that popularized Imperium, or published Imperium in the U.S.
Well, he was handed the knowledge through osmosis when Yaki died, and it passed on to him, and now he is the Kizaract or whatever.
Yes. And then, of course, all of his race science stuff, his favorite Nazi writers, and this is Noontide Press, of course, which would remain pretty important in, by the time we get to the 90s, when like assets are getting liquidated and stuff, they're up for that kind of far right publishing house, a pretty big.
Yeah.
I mean, they're making money.
Yes.
And they're publishing books by what's his name? The Belgian guy, De Grelle or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
They're publishing Nazis that survived, the Holocaust denial stuff,
Sure.
the whole thing. And so it's a pretty serious publishing house. But then, of course, he had his newsletters and newspapers too. We mentioned Liberty Letter before. There's Liberty Lowdown. And
I can't say any of these.
Liberty Letter, Liberty Letter.
No.
And we ended that episode with Liberty Lobby's Liberty Letter.
Oh, you did. Yeah, I'm still pretty jealous of that.
Now I can't do it. So by the mid 60s, Carto purchased a magazine called The American Mercury.
Yeah, right. We talked about American Mercury before. Carto was the one that got that motherfucker. Okay.
I know that we did, but when? Because American Mercury is super important in this time period, but I knew it before I read more about Carto.
I think it was I think it might have been with Revelo, because Revelo published an American Mercury for sure.
Yes.
The thing that stuck in my mind about that was that he's always been kind of a theater kid, and American Mercury used to be, I believe, a paper that covered like the arts and theater.
It did, yeah. So American Mercury was a paper that was started in the 1920s.
Yeah, right.
So it already been around for quite some time. I mean, it's the same age as Carto, basically. In the 1950s, it came under the ownership of some weird, like, anti-Semitic religious cult.
Okay.
Like I think maybe, I'm not 100% on this, but it seems like some sort of kind of proto-Christian identity type,
just some
racist religious Christian
cult
movement or whatever.
They'll be dead by morning.
Yeah, you might be right.
And that is a group, and then it's controlled by this group called the Legion for the Survival of Freedom. And this is pretty important, and American Mercury is pretty important too, because it also evolves and in an important way into his later Holocaust revisionist newspaper. Basically, the Journal for Historical Review kind of develops out of American Mercury with a lot of the same people initially.
Okay.
And the Legion for the Survival of Freedom is, well, we'll get there, but it later becomes it's the parent company to the Institute for Historical Review. So that's an important name to remember.
Yeah.
Especially since when they get into legal shit, that's a big sticking point.
Well, then say it again.
The Legion for the Survival of Freedom.
How can you forget that? It's
such
freedom.
Generic American.
And it's Legion is the
Legion, yeah.
That's the group noun they're using, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But American Mercury, like you said, is that's where Revelo is. It's publishing a lot of big names at the time, even before and up to when Carto buys it and takes it over. So
I think
Gerald L. K. Smith, for example.
Oh, word. Okay,
in there.
That's way deep and crazy town there. But I was going to say that I think Revelo maybe had hoped, and maybe you can tell me if you get this impression from Carto, that this would be their competition against the National Review.
Yes. Oh, no. American Mercury had problems with the National Review before Carto took it over.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, actually. Exactly.
So I think
William F. Buckley.
I think that William F. Buckley even maybe sued American Mercury for libel at some point.
Were they talking shit about him? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so their split was super deep at this point. The mainstream right was really. Well, if we imagine that as represented by William F. Buckley, then we've got this other second order right that's also combining their forces somehow. Like if there were once a bunch of loose sticks, now they're bringing all those little sticks together into some kind of a bundle and then tying that bundle up quite tightly.
Yes.
So that's how it's kind of going on, right?
Yeah.
What would you call that?
Boner?
No, it's not. It's fashion. Right. Jesus. Enough. This guy,
he's got
out of control.
One-track mind.
He's fucking out of control here.
Come on. It's ridiculous, Ray. Pull yourself together, man. Jesus Christ.
I'm carving shit into the hippie's head.
Well, then you just keep on keeping on. He's got things to do. It's okay. Psychotic.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about the whole William F. Buckley thing, by this point, they definitely don't like each other. But remember early on in Wright, there were favorable words exchanged. But by this point, like the Birchers and Liberty Lobby and the National Review and William F. Buckley are not getting along.
Yeah, right. Because of who they are.
Pretty famously, yeah. So I mean, American Mercury, well established, but is kind of under poor management, and so Carto takes it over. By 1975, Carto transforms the Liberty Letter into a weekly news magazine called The Spotlight. It actually had a different name first, and then it was Spotlight, and then it just became The Spotlight.
Okay, and this was not a National Youth Alliance publication, right?
No, this is Liberty Lobby's. Okay. So Liberty Lobby had a variety of different publications, and whatever, they'd be like weekly or quarterlies and all this.
Well, I wanted to just bring up this. I was asking publications because since we're hitting that 74 to 6 area, 75, this is the time when William Luther Pierce begins creating the Turner Diaries, I think, through small like journal entries in the magazine Attack, which grew out of
the National Youth Alliance.
Yes, which grew out of Statecraft, I think, magazine. Yes. Because I think, if I'm remembering right, he had a column called Revolutionary Notes, which basically he just ripped off of like leftist guerrilla publications and just like straight up photocopied shit into their magazine. And that carried on over to Attack. Yeah. So this is that period where also on William Luther Pierce's end, the National Alliance is kind of coming into being. Like the core output that they made is beginning to happen now. Yeah.
It's not a funny story at all.
Well, I'm sorry, but the story of the magazine Spotlight is nonetheless important.
So yeah, Spotlight becomes probably their most successful publication. Definitely their most successful publication. And
again, a very mundane name.
Mundane name.
Go under the radar a bit.
But also, it goes under the radar. It's just generic enough that it's not called whatever, Attack, fucking William Luther
with an exclamation point and a picture of someone hanging on the front.
Yeah, this is definitely not that. And it's kind of in this it comes out it's weekly. And this is a publication that at its peak probably had a membership or subscription subscriber base of like over 300,000.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
So not small actually at all. And you can kind of tell by some of the subjects and like people that are involved how much it came to like how maybe I don't want to like overstep and say it shaped how we understand some of America's far right politics today, but I think it kind of does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big reader base, and so of course, John Wayne. Subscriber.
Yeah, that's right. Did we mention that before? It's how we established that our episode title from a couple arcs back, John Wayne was a fascist, was in fact true. Yeah. Of course, we stole that from the fantastic song of the same title, but he's one of them.
So, this publication that exists from the 70s up until the, Liberty Lobby folds in 2001, this is where you're seeing, like, even from the early days, lots of kind of traditional American far-right conspiracy stuff.
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve, the taxes, the Bilderberg Group, the Rockefellers.
Yes.
I
worked at Build-A-Bear once.
Yes. Did you?
Back in, nice. It was a long time ago. It was a horrible job.
I bet it was.
It was fucking terrible. I have stories.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Was a very low summer for a teenage me.
Well, imagine. But then, of course, other very familiar things for the American right too. So, like alternative medicine, quackery. That they had a lot of that.
Yeah.
They promoted buying gold and silver.
Very nice.
And had their own mint.
Oh, no way.
The Liberty Trust.
Yes.
They sold their own gold and silver. This is such a classic
this
American right-wing thing. I don't know if they were the first to do it, but they,
I mean, minting your own coins. I mean, if you're a fan, as we are, of the Right Side Broadcasting Network, I mean, it's like fully a quarter of it. The commercials that are not My Pillow are still newly minted gold coins, gold and silver for your future.
So they're doing this early.
Damn, word.
They're doing this in the 70s.
Nice.
And then, of course, healthy mix dose of anti-Semitism coded in anti-Zionist speech. We'll get to a little bit of that later. A lot of connections in the growing militia movement.
Yes.
Depew had written for Mercury in American Mercury.
That makes sense as well. Okay.
And was affiliated with Liberty Lobby too, even after he had kind of had his coming out of his low points.
Yeah. I was just thinking about Depew today, actually, because I was thinking of what would have happened if they had successfully offed I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball, as they had wanted to.
Right. I forgot about
effect that would have had on the American mind. Like, that's like Kennedy level shock, if not more.
Yeah. Also a lot of Kennedy JFK conspiracy stuff in Spotlight as well.
Well, that makes sense. That's coming out of that same background. The JBS JBS adjacent. This is interesting. What's your sense, actually, of at this point in their history, by the time we have Spotlight coming out, of how John Birch Society, do they still have any connection at all to this Carto strain, or have they completely split at this point?
I mean, I think on an official level, obviously, I think that it's a pretty clear split.
Yeah.
I think in readership...
Oh, sure. Okay.
And probably contributors too. There's a considerable overlap, I think.
Because I noticed that even as of 1969, the National Youth Alliance and their papers still were referencing John Birch Society publications. Yeah. So at least as that time,
I think maybe referencing Birch stuff would probably be a no-no in Carto's.
By this time, yeah.
At this time, but I think that there's definitely overlap in probably even the writers.
Okay, cool.
So you also see a lot of like Christian identity stuff coming up, militia stuff.
Right. I bet aliens are probably around now too, I'm guessing.
I'm not sure how much aliens featured in Spotlight. That's an interesting question.
Spotlight, I guess they probably wouldn't fit actually, but I'm thinking more
they might, though.
The extended circles, because I know that they did have a couple guys running around. I mean, if they're Christian identity adjacent, post late 50s, then they're going to have some alien guys running around for sure.
Right. I mean, they even had foreign correspondents. They had, guys writing from Canada, the UK, South Africa to, report on their, Rhodesia stuff that they love so much.
Right.
And Spotlight really helped because of its huge membership or readership base to expand the Liberty Lobby's network and their kind of prestige in right-wing circles.
Yeah.
So, like, this is also around the time that they're forging relationships with, like, Lyndon LaRouche.
Yeah, okay.
And LaRouche's people, which is
we
another
can't
level
go
of
fucking 3
crazy.
episodes these days without hitting him somehow.
Well, I mean, this is that time.
Yeah.
Also, of course, he has ties to the World Anti-Communist League, which I think we'll do separate episodes on.
Looking forward to getting into that.
And so, like I said, a lot of in all of Liberty Lobby's publications make a lot of space for to the scourge of Zionism,
right,
and its control over America and world government. So accounts of Israeli war crimes are pretty prevalent here, but it's also intertwined with this narrative of Zionist domination. More explicitly, they had a pretty well-known pamphlet called America First that comes out in the early 70s, but it's something that they kind of continue to distribute.
Oh, interesting.
That kind of is there to provide what the Americanist view on events in the Middle East should be.
Okay.
From an anti-intervention, from an isolationist kind of perspective.
Okay.
Which, sure, might be okay if it wasn't also explicitly promoting the theory that Zionists were responsible for World War I and, of course, World War II.
Yes.
Because the World Jewish Congress declared economic war on Hitler.
Yeah.
And the Germans were backed into a corner.
Right.
And the Zionist-controlled media drew America into the war.
Yeah.
So you see where that's going.
Oh, yeah. We've been down there before.
Yeah.
Stinky.
So, meanwhile, Noontide Press at this time is publishing all the cutting edge of Holocaust revisionism at this time, from the 60s on.
Okay.
And this is all being distributed through the Liberty Lobby wide network that they now have.
And this, to my memory, and please correct me if you know differently, but I recall this is sort of the birth of Holocaust revision.
Absolutely.
As
absolutely.
I'll put it in single quotes, a discipline of study.
Yeah. And this is something that, Carto really had his finger on the pulse of Holocaust revisionism.
Sure. Yeah.
Because, as a guy who was already into Nazi stuff in the 50s.
And also Yaki's sort of criticisms of the Nuremberg trials probably helped push that along.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Totally. And this is where he's reading some of the earliest Holocaust revisionist works that are coming out,
right.
Soon after the war. And connection to Yaki for sure.
But these are also isolated essays by isolated writers. There's not
he's doing his part to publish them. So he's actually some of the kind of more obscure today Holocaust revisionists, if you look at who was publishing them.
Not the big popular ones.
Not the big popular ones. Well, no, I mean, actually, he makes some people like David Irving, who's going to be a big part of the Institute for Historical Review, is you could say a popular Holocaust revisionist. Yeah. But the early ones that, let's say weren't so well known were being published by, Noontide Press or by his some of his previous kind of publishing endeavors. So he's always been on that. And I think this is really important to the next step in this story, which is that I think that, again, I like to bring this back to my theory of dad.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine that he's doing all this, but I think he's still imagining that dad's bridge partners and golf buddies still don't think that this stuff's legitimate. And if only there was a respectable intellectual way to promote Holocaust. And that takes us to the Institute for Historical Review.
God damn. Finally. We have been talking about this thing since back in the William Luther Pierce episodes. M.A.R. Barker was a contributor to this, the guy who wrote the Tecumel fantasy world.
So, I mean, the Institute for Historical Review is a subject that we could dedicate, honestly, a whole series to.
Yes.
I'm going to give us kind of the rundown of Carto's involvement.
Okay, good.
Rather than kind of their content.
No, I mean,
so much.
It's kind of pointless.
I mean, it's Holocaust.
You've read one, you've read literally all of it. I swear
yeah.
to you. It's not, there's not new findings, because it didn't,
Yeah.
It's a fake discipline.
Exactly. So in 1978, I guess Carto was finally fed up with everybody treating him like an asshole for, not believing that the Holocaust happened. and that it exists to make Western man feel bad, so that the Zionists can better control America and force them into world government or whatever.
In Bishop Richard Williamson's words, Holocaustianity.
Yes, or the Magian myth of the Holocaust.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
And he decided that a research institute should be established to challenge establishment views.
Okay. Yeah.
They're like being anti-establishment.
Big history,
Big history.
Yeah.
Is really keep it. That's how they think, actually.
Yeah.
So like pretty much all of his groups, Carto didn't want to be the face of the organization. This
Right.
is pretty familiar to us at this point. And he incorporates it through that Legion for whatever, the defense of freedom, whatever the fuck it is.
Salvation of freedom?
Salvation of freedom.
Something like that. God damn it.
And the face of the organization becomes the co-founder, William McCaldon, who, interesting guy.
Sounds suspiciously Irish.
He's a UK citizen.
Mm-hmm.
He had been a member of the National Front.
Okay.
In the UK and National Party, was the editor of both of their papers. So he was kind of the smart guy over there, I guess, in the National Front. So this is all before he moves to the US. And when he starts the Institute for Historical Review with Carto, he's actually using a pseudonym of Lewis Brandon.
That sounds like the name he wanted to be born with,
So McCaldon and Carto predictably have a pretty big split.
Yeah.
Pretty early on, and there are all kinds of rumors. There are all kinds of rumors about him swirling around after he left the Institute for Historical Review, namely that he was gay.
Okay,
which is
usual.
typical.
Yeah.
He died of AIDS in 1990.
Oh, okay.
And there were like even, I guess, photos that surfaced of him that he was like in gay porn or something.
I mean, it's not. The thing is like it could be true, but it doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter.
Stupid
It doesn't matter.
Like,
more importantly to them, I think, well, maybe not to them more importantly, but I think on par with that is that they accused him of being like an agent for the ADL.
Another common accusation.
A very common accusation
circles.
as well.
Although, to be fair, to my memory, there were in fact like undercover ADL guys in their midst all the time. So
I kind of, obviously doubt that, because after he leaves this, he goes back to England and plays a big role in the British National Party.
Yeah, right.
And he's not working for the ADL then. And
no, I'm not saying that he was, but there are like ADL reports of their guys going undercover and coming back with really funny stories.
Yeah.
Usually. Yeah.
And I think his connection to the ADL, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look this up, was that he was a close associate of a person who ended up, I think, being outed as an ADL agent or something. And then by default, he was also an ADL.
Okay.
guy.
Yeah.
But, who the fuck knows these people?
And who cares?
And he continued to be a Holocaust
matter.
denier
Yes.
when he moved back to the UK and was writing books about that and, and the like. So, total piece of shit.
Yes.
So, Liberty Lobby provides the cash, and he lets his eggheads do the heavy lifting, intellectual.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we're not talking about the brightest minds here. But the IHR is probably still the biggest promoter of Holocaust revisionism, at least in the English speaking world.
Well, yeah.
And like I said, there are all these people like David Irving that are associated with the Institute, M.A.R. Barker.
Yeah.
All kinds of people have taken part in this. I mean, there are ones that even later after Carto's involvement are, and during Carto's involvement too, like reaching out to guys in the Middle East. They have connections in Europe as well, including, I'm sorry, I just have to say the guy's name.
Please.
The German neo-Nazi Friedhelm Bussy.
Oh my God. I love it. Yes.
Friedhelm Bussy.
Oh, come on. Did he know someday we would need that name on this very show?
Yes. I can't not do it.
Friedhelm Bussy.
Bussy.
None of us will ever forget that name.
No. And so of course, what is a respectable academic, research institute need? It needs
money. It needs
a journal.
A journal, of course. Sorry.
And since Carto's very creative with naming things, what do you think it's called?
Well, I'd call it the journal of something. Maybe historical review?
Correct.
Hey, there we go. You don't have to think that hard.
No. So, this is a thing that has the look and feel of a real academic journal.
Yeah.
This isn't like a tabloid layout or a magazine layout. This is...
Yeah. No, for real.
I'm sure that Carto, when he was getting this all together, he could see you could hear the harpsichords play.
Yeah, like in the beginning of a Jordan
books, and
in a Jordan Peterson video.
Yes, exactly. Yes. That's probably what he imagined himself to.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, the respectable Holocaust denier.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, of course. Like the editors and the board members majority of them have PhDs in something, and that's important for their credibility. But of course, what does a serious academic research institute do? To prove that they're serious, and that's offer cash prizes for proving that the gas chambers weren't real.
Oh, that's so legit.
Yeah, very legit.
That's awesome. And I remember this. This was a big deal because it became the longer this bet went on, right? The more propaganda value it garnered for them, right?
So basically, yeah, I guess. When you start a Holocaust revisionist institute, the media doesn't look upon you very favorably, and nobody.
Well, not anymore.
Nobody wants to read your shit, and nobody's going to take you seriously.
Right.
So, how do you get out there to the media?
Yeah,
and get positive attention, I guess. And it's through these kind of raffles and cash prizes. So. $50,000 to the fella who can prove that the gas chambers were real. $25,000 to the fella who can validate Anne Frank's diary.
Oh my God.
And $25,000 if you can prove that the Nazis made soap out of Jews.
Oh my God. Oh, they're such disgusting people.
Yeah. And I guess this is the kind of thing that gets you attention.
Yeah, of course.
Simon Wiesenthal, I think, even tried to do the Anne Frank one.
Really?
They couldn't agree, I guess, on the person who would validate its authenticity.
Of course. I mean, the point of this is never to win it. I mean, the point of this is to set it up so you never have to pay it off. And then you can be like, we've been offering this for 20 years now, and still no one has shown any proof to us of the gas chambers.
But yeah, some people will persist.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's an Auschwitz survivor.
Oh, goddamn. Okay.
By the name of Mel Mermelstein, who submitted a claim that, of course, he personally witnessed people being killed in the gas chambers.
Yes.
Including his entire family was murdered at Auschwitz-Birkenau. And when they denied his claim, he sued them.
Good.
And you can just imagine all the anti-Semitic shit that they would say getting sued by a dude named Mel Mermelstein. It's like the final boss of Jewish guy names.
But also you're
can you imagine
you're the litigious one.
You're the litigious one.
You're the one that sued at the drop of a hat.
Against Mel Mermelstein.
Yes. God damn. Who was there?
Who was there?
Yeah, good job. Man, what an idiot this Carto.
And so the case became a major media event, as you might imagine.
Of course.
And continued on for a number of years. It kind of dragged on none. Crucially for Mermelstein, the LA judge in charge of the case, presiding over the case, made an official notice to the court that they will not dispute. The court considers gassing of Jews in the Holocaust to be unestablished, indisputable historical fact, and that they're not going to waste time with bullshit to the contrary, which is probably the entire point of the Institute for Historical Review trying because I'd imagine that they knew that somebody would probably try to sue them at some point.
You'd guess.
And that then they would have a chance to present their case in court. Right. And that gets shut down.
In a public trial. And have the possibility, maybe if they were quite shifty and they got very lucky, maybe they could convince some jury people to ultimately like validate their
right. And so that gets thrown out immediately because, and you know, that probably reaffirms the belief in Zog or whatever.
Yeah. You can't lose with these people.
And it wasn't until, so this happened in 1981, and he sues the Institute for Historical Review and Carto himself as the kind of man behind it.
Okay.
And it wasn't settled until 1985, and the Institute for Historical Review was forced to pay out the $50,000.
Yeah.
In addition to another $40,000 for pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Mermelstein wasn't quite done there. He wanted to keep going.
Yes.
And there were a bunch of
Get him, Mel.
suits and countersuits from Carto then that kind of dragged on for the next couple of years.
This sounds very expensive for Carto. Like, how is he?
Yeah, I mean, Carto tries to sue Mermelstein for libel, I think, in 86, but then drops it before he even goes anywhere.
You still got to pay those fees, you know, like shit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, but he is making money at the time, and we'll get to the money thing here great. Here in a second, because that's actually the most important part.
Okay, I'm curious.
So Mermelstein, despite trying to do all these countersuits, and he's like trying to sue them for millions of dollars, the judges are pretty much throwing them out and being like, no, we're staying by the decision that we made in 85. Sorry, but you did a good thing. You proved the Holocaust was real in court, basically.
Okay.
That's been established now as a a thing. And but the fact that he wasn't able to win more money is something that Carto, I guess, considered to be some sort of victory.
Oh my God, he got twice as much as he was owed almost, and Carto's like, "Well, loser."
Yeah.
What a little dweeb.
But it was after the whole Mermelstein case that McCalden leaves. And so that it did cause some rifts within the organization, but there was actually a lot more rifts developing, and this would not be their biggest legal challenge.
Okay.
Which would ironically not come from outside, but from within.
Okay.
So about the money.
So Nazi, that whole sentence.
Yeah. So about the money, I think probably one of the reasons that the Institute for Historical Review wasn't so fazed about having to pay out $90K to Mel Mermelstein and throwing all this legal money around is that they had support of some wealthy backers.
Yeah.
Most notably, Jean Edison Farrell.
Oh, an Edison.
Yes,
All
that
right.
Edison.
Yeah. Okay.
And her attempt to kind of set Carto up for life failed spectacularly, backfired completely in a way that's almost just mind-blowing. Because you think, okay, so let's get there. So she is an Edison.
Yeah. Strong start.
As if we needed another reason to hate Thomas Edison.
Yes.
The whole family are assholes.
Yeah. Well, if we recall, Thomas Edison also kind of made Henry Ford into the robotic piece of shit that he was.
Absolutely. And so Jean Edison is Thomas Edison's grandniece, but the heiress to the fortune. But her uncle, who is Thomas Edison's son and former governor of New York, his name being, hold on one sec.
I'm guessing something Edison.
It is something Edison.
Most fast food places don't deliver at this hour.
Dude, just wait. Out of control.
Charles Edison, former governor of New York, and Thomas Edison's son, so her uncle, was an early supporter of Liberty Lobby in the 50s.
Yeah, all right.
So like they're all assholes.
Yeah.
So Jean Edison Farrell, as it turns out, was a complete lunatic and Nazi.
Okay.
She's a big supporter, financial backer of Liberty Lobby.
Yeah.
And served on their board of policy. She was a tax nut. She was like afraid of the IRS. I think she somehow acquired Colombian citizenship and moved to Switzerland. That's where she lived out her days.
I'm sorry, did she miss her connecting flight? Is that what happened there?
I think the Colombian passport was just easy to get in the 70s, whenever she went.
I know, the mental capacities of the people we're talking about are not that great.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, she definitely knew she wasn't long for this world, though. I'm not, she was, I guess, old at the time. not sure how old. And she decided that she would leave $10 million
Oh shit.
in stock certificates to, well, this is where it gets complicated.
Okay.
To Willis Carto,
Okay.
but not to him directly. According to him, he thought that would be unfair just to go directly into his hands.
Okay.
And so it was left to the Legion for the Survival of Freedom Incorporated.
Uh-huh. All right.
Which is the entity behind the Institute for Historical Review.
And probably some sort of tax write-off too, I bet. Some
Well,
shit
okay,
like
it gets complicated.
Okay.
She subsequently dies in 1985, very soon after setting this all up.
Okay.
And the way that this was set up is that she put the assets into a corporation that, if I'm not mistaken, was registered in Liberia.
Okay.
Not sketchy at all.
All right. Also deeply and tragically ironic somehow.
Well, they were also big supporters. Carter was a big supporter of the Liberian Project.
Oh, of course, because they want, what am I
black people
saying?
to go to Africa,
Yeah. They're exactly right. Yeah.
So the corporation controls the assets, which in turn was supposed to be controlled by Carto. But this gets complicated from the get-go. So as soon as she dies, Carto gets on a flight, goes to Switzerland, and immediately gets into a legal dispute with some Swiss woman that's controlling the Edison Farrell estate.
Okay.
And this drags on for nearly 5 years.
All right.
And it involves Carto having to go to court in Switzerland, spending enormous amounts of money doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
But he eventually they settle, and he gets control of $7.2 million.
That's still a fuck ton of money.
Yeah, let's recognize how insane that is.
That's insane.
Willis Carto and the Liberty Lobby get $7.2 million in 1990 money.
Yeah.
That's a shitload of money.
Yeah.
That's pretty nuts.
So he becomes so he's a multi-millionaire now, and
but is he? Who's controlling it? This is where it gets this is where it starts to get really crazy, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, of course, once you get that kind of money, the haters come out the woodwork. No, everybody's trying to get
old friends too.
Yeah, old friends. You see, by the time he gets this money in the 1990s, things in the Institute for Historical Review are predictably, for a Carter organization, going kind of haywire.
They're falling apart, huh?
I'm saying I'm surprised that it didn't happen even earlier. It probably didn't, because he was busy, going to Switzerland and trying to get this money.
Yeah. Also, I assume it's a journal, so probably a lot of their meeting is not face to face and stuff. So maybe they were spared his personality for a while. Maybe.
Well, yeah. So one of the rising stars, or let's say one of the main rising stars in the Institute for Historical Review, is a guy named Mark Weber. He was the editor-in-chief of the journal, and he eventually actually becomes head of the organization. Remember, Carto's never at the head of the Institute for Historical Review. He's the gray eminence behind everything.
Yeah, right.
And he's not even necessarily in control of the corporation that's behind it. And this is where it starts to get crazy for them. So Weber and Carto have been kind of moving apart for quite some time. My understanding of the split has something to do with Weber wanting to take the IHR into a more, let's say, Holocaust revisionist centric direction.
Okay.
And would prefer to jettison Liberty Lobby completely, and all the bullshit explicitly neo-Nazi stuff.
So he's trying to pull a Willis Carto on Willis Carto.
He's trying to pull a Willis Carto on Willis Carto.
Right.
He's like, look, I don't believe the Holocaust is real or whatever.
Right.
But all this Nazi shit.
But I'm not a Nazi.
Oh yeah, all this race science Nazi shit looks bad for me or whatever.
Oh my God.
And so
what are these people's fucking standards? I'm having such a hard time.
I know. I mean, again, you're talking about a faction of two of the worst kind of people ever.
Yes.
A guy who's committed his life to proving the Holocaust wasn't real in some quasi academic fashion.
Right.
With fucking Willis Carto.
Yes.
These guys are both shitheads. And so when, Carto does get a hold of this money, they decide, the Weber faction, basically the Institute for Historical Review, decides to sue Willis Carto for taking money that was intended for them.
Okay.
So she left that money to the parent company of the Institute for Historical Review, not to Willis Carto and the Liberty Lobby.
But that means he's clean, right?
Well, no, he has the money though.
I see.
And so they say that he's embezzled the money, that like they haven't seen a dime of it. He's just doing whatever he wants with it.
Yeah.
Which I think is true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, shit. Who wouldn't?
And like, okay, now let's just do a quick rundown because this is about a decade's worth of legal law and order bullshit that is just mind-numbingly dumb. No, it's the because I mean these are just the worst people fighting each other. So 1996, the court rules in favor of the Institute for Historical Review. Carto somehow ends up owing even more back to them and like interest and the like.
Great.
And damages, this, that, and the other
Love
thing.
to hear it.
A bunch of countersuits ensue.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. I was getting happy that he's losing, but I remember just then who's fucking winning.
Right.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. By 1998, both Liberty Lobby and Willis Carto personally have to file for bankruptcy.
Okay.
More legal insanity continues.
Sure.
Before Liberty Lobby is finally forced to surrender all of its assets to the Institute for Historical Review.
Word.
And
it's like Zeus and Kronos.
Yeah, and this is now the end of the Liberty Lobby. So 2001, Liberty Lobby is kaput. They have gone completely under. Carto and is flat broke. Sells the house, completely fucked. Institute for Historical Review gets everything. Although my understanding is that by the time they finally settle all of this shit, nobody gives a fuck about the Institute for Historical Review anymore.
Sure.
They just spent like
a
decade fighting each other over money that they kind of didn't even really end up being able to do anything with.
Instead of focusing on the science of Holocaust denial.
Focusing the science on... So yeah, good old-fashioned Nazi infight destroys kind of both. I mean, the Institute for Historical Review still exists, but in a much more diminished capacity than they probably would if they had gotten that $10 million, if they'd gotten that $7.2 million immediately.
Yeah.
And Carto did have control. I'm willing to bet that they could have done a lot of shit. Instead, they spent like a good decade fighting about the money, going broke, and imploding the organization.
Yeah.
So this is where this story will more or less end. But Carto isn't done. Despite Liberty Lobby finally, after decades of activity, going under in kind of the funniest way possible.
Yeah.
In a legal battle with his own creation, the Holocaust revisionist.
It's a bit
journal and institute for whatever research institute.
It gives Arrested Development vibes at times.
It does.
Somehow, doesn't it? Well, all right.
So there are no winners here,
especially not us.
In next episode, we're actually going to go back to the decade that we skipped mostly over the 80s, and some of the 90s, and talk about what was going on there with his political activity, and then get into what happened after the Liberty Lobby disappeared. And he continued his Holocaust revisionist stuff in the form of the Barnes Review, which we've talked about on the show before.
Yeah, right.
So we're not done with Carto yet. I'd like to give, before we tune out, a big shout out to some listeners which have offered us really, really amazing research material.
Yeah.
I think that that'll be fuel for plenty of other episodes in the future.
It was like Christmas.
So yeah, big shout out to y'all.
Yeah, it's just, we have some of the coolest listeners anywhere.
Yes,
I'll stand on that.
Yes.
Ray, what did you think about this episode?
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, like
Oh, cool. Okay.
What you just said.
Yeah, you weren't listening at all, were you?
He's been zoning out here.
Yeah.
Robo Ray.
Boner?
Come on, man. All right, that's enough.
Enough of that.
That's Jesus Christ. We gotta. I miss a Bio Ray. Sick of this fucking robot shit. All right. Well.
All right. Well, we'll
continue the
see
story
you in part 3.
That's right, and see you guys back on the Patreon for what we got going on there.
And there will be stuff.
There will be stuff.
There's always stuff.
We're pretty good about that. We miss some things sometimes. Summer can be difficult to keep on schedule, but you know what?
We always say that winter can be hard to keep on schedule.
Yeah,
we're always hard to keep on schedule. Let's be honest.
Every month is.
But there's always something. There's something.
Yes, we feed our kids. Damn it. Yes, we put food on our families.
Just like Willis Carto.
That's right.
We march on.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
not Holocaust revisionism or whatever.
All right.
Intensely boring.
Okay.
All right. See ya later. Hey there, all you free people enjoying your free episodes from The Empire Never Ended. Maybe scoot on over to patreon.com/tenepod and become a patron. We publish 3 additional premium episodes there alongside the 2 freebies each month. We're on Twitter too, also at Tenepod, but our Patreon is really where it's at. See you there, maybe? Eh?